Surah Yasin is probably the most recited chapter of the Quran after Al-Fatiha. It is read over the sick, it is read at funerals, it is read on Friday mornings in millions of homes, and there are people who have it memorized who have not memorized anything else. In some communities, it is printed and bound on its own, as a separate book, which almost no other single chapter receives. Walk into a shop selling religious goods anywhere from Jakarta to Manchester, and you will find a Yasin sold as an object in its own right. And the reason everybody gives for all of that is a sentence that Hadith scholars have been rejecting for over 1,000 years, not a controversial sentence, and not one that anyone has hidden. The rejection is printed alongside the sentence in the very collection people cite. We are going to deal with that honestly in the next few minutes, and then we are going to leave it behind entirely, because it turns out the surah does not need it. There is a structure inside Surah Yasin that almost nobody points out, and once you see it, you will not be able to read the chapter the same way again. It has to do with 2 letters at the beginning and 2 words at the end, and a man in the middle who is never named. Start with the claim everybody knows. The sentence is that everything has a heart, and the heart of the Quran is Yasin, and that whoever recites it will have the reward of reciting the whole Quran 10 times. It is narrated from Anas, may Allah be pleased with him, and it is recorded by al-Tirmidhi as Hadith 2887. Here is the part that gets left out. Al-Tirmidhi, the man who collected it, appended his own assessment to it. He said that it is not authentic because of its chain, and that its chain is weak. The collector said so, in the collection, at the time of collecting. It goes further. Al-Albani examined this narration and placed it in al-Silsila al-Da'ifa, his series on weak and fabricated reports, at number 169, and his verdict there was that it is fabricated. To be fair to the whole picture, some later scholars have argued that the various chains reporting this idea support one another and lift the material to an acceptable level. That is a real methodological position, and I am not hiding it from you. But the weight of assessment on this particular narration falls heavily toward weak, and its own collector is part of that weight. The same problem attaches to the other famous instruction, the one about reciting Yasin over the dying. That narration is reported through Abu Dawud and Ibn Majah and others. It has been graded acceptable by some and weak by others, and it is genuinely contested rather than settled. Ibn Hibban accepted it. Al-Albani did not. And the Friday recitation report, and the report that God recited Taha and Yasin 1,000 years before creating the heavens and the earth, both come out worse than that. The second one, al-Albani, classed as munkar, a form of weakness where a narration stands in conflict with stronger material. So here is the honest summary, and then we move on. The special virtues attached to this specific chapter are not established the way the virtues of al-Fatiha or Ayat al-Kursi or the last 2 chapters are established, and those latter ones are in al-Bukhari and Muslim, with no dispute at all. Now, I am not telling you to stop reading Surah Yasin. Reciting any part of the Quran is rewarded, and there is a completely authentic narration for that. The one where the Prophet, peace be upon him, said that whoever recites a letter from the Book of God receives a reward multiplied by 10. That covers Yasin because it covers every chapter in the book, without exception and without dispute. What I am telling you is that the reason people give for this chapter status is not the reason that holds up. And that is worth noticing, because the actual reason is sitting in the text where anyone can check it, and it is better. Think about what has happened here as a pattern, because it repeats across a lot of Islamic content. A chapter of the Quran, genuinely magnificent, has been given a reputation that rests on a sentence its own collector rejected. Meanwhile, the thing that actually makes it remarkable, which is its content and its architecture, gets almost no attention at all. People recite it constantly and discuss it rarely. The result is that a chapter with one of the most striking structures in the entire Quran is famous for a reward multiplier. That is a strange trade, and this video is an attempt to reverse it. Let us go and look at it. The chapter opens with 2 letters. Ya, Sin. Not a word. In Arabic, those 2 sounds placed together mean nothing at all. They are letter names, announced individually, the way a person spells something out. This is one of 29 chapters in the Quran that open this way, using a set of 14 letters, exactly half the Arabic alphabet, in combinations of 1 to 5. They are called the huruf al-muqatta'at, the disjointed letters, and nobody has ever definitively explained them. Not a commentator, and according to every authentic collection we possess, not the Prophet, peace be upon him. I have a full video on that subject, and it is the natural companion to this one. But for our purposes here, notice two specific things about Yasin's opening. The first is that this chapter does not merely start with those letters. It is named after them. Yasin is the name of the surah. Only 4 chapters in the entire Quran carry their disjointed letters as their title, and this is one of them. Millions of Muslim boys are named Yasin after a chapter whose title is 2 letters that nobody can explain, and the combination it uses is one of the shortest available. Some of these chapters open with a single letter. Chapter 50 is just Qaf. Chapter 38 is just Sad. Others run to 5, like chapter 19 with its Qaf Ha Ya Ain Sad. Yasin sits near the bottom of that range with 2. 2 letters is almost the least a chapter can open with, and still be doing this at all. The second thing to notice is what comes immediately afterward. Verse 2 is an oath, and it swears by the wise Quran, with 2 letters that carry no meaning, and then immediately swears by the book those letters belong to. That is not unique to this surah. It is the pattern across almost all 29 of them. The letters land, and then the text turns and speaks about the revelation itself. Here are the raw components, spelled out one at a time, and then, this is the book. So Surah Yasin opens by holding up something unreadable, and then swearing by the thing it belongs to. And the oath itself is worth a moment. By the wise Quran. The adjective chosen is Hakim, which carries wisdom, judgment, and precision, the sense of something put exactly where it should be. So the chapter's opening move is to present 2 syllables that cannot be parsed and then describe the book they belong to as precisely constructed, unreadable, and exact in consecutive verses. That combination is either careless or it is the point, and the rest of the chapter is going to tell you which. Hold that, because the end of this chapter is going to do the exact opposite, and the 2 ends are the structure. Now the center of the chapter, and this is the passage that should be famous and somehow is not. The surah sets up a scene. A town, which the Quran does not name. Messengers sent to it, whom the Quran does not name either. Verse 14. When we sent to them 2, and they denied them both, so we strengthened them with a 3rd, and they said, Indeed we are messengers to you. 2 refused, then a 3rd added. And that is the only number the chapter gives you in this passage, which matters, because it is scripture supplied rather than counted up by a commentator afterward. That is a closed count given by the text itself, and it is worth noticing how sparse the account is. No names, no location, no date. The Quran is stripping this story down to its mechanism. The townspeople answer, and their answer is the oldest objection in scripture. They say these are only men like ourselves, that the Most Merciful has revealed nothing, and that they are lying. Then it escalates. The people tell the messengers that they see them as a bad omen, and they threaten them. They say that if the messengers do not stop, they will stone them, and that a painful punishment will come from them. The messengers answer that threat with a single line that reframes it. They tell them that their omen is with themselves, and ask whether being reminded is what they are calling a bad sign. That is the state of the argument. 3 men in the center of a town, outnumbered, being told to stop or be stoned to death. And that is where the passage sits when the story changes, and it changes because somebody starts running. Verse 20. And there came from the farthest end of the city a man running. He said, O my people, follow the messengers. Stop on the geography, because the Quran chose it deliberately. The farthest end of the city, not the center, not the assembly where the argument was happening. He was as far from the conversation as a person could be and still be in the same town, which means he heard about it late, second or third hand, after it had already traveled the length of the place, and it means he was nobody. He held no position in that argument. He was not one of the elders debating whether to stone the messengers. And the verse says he came running. An unimportant man at the edge of a town, hearing about something happening in the center and covering the distance at a run. And notice what running actually means in that sentence, because it is easy to read past. Running is what you do when you think you might be too late. He is not walking over to contribute an opinion. He has calculated that something is about to happen and that the distance between him and it is a problem. Whatever he thought was about to be done to those three men, he thought it was close enough that speed mattered. Then he speaks, and his argument is remarkably clean. He says, "Follow those who ask no payment of you, and who are rightly guided." That is his whole case. Look at what they are charging you. Nothing. He goes on. He asks why he should not worship the one who created him, and to whom all of them will be returned. He asks whether he should take other gods besides him, gods whose intercession would help him nothing and who could not rescue him. He says that if he did that, he would be in clear error. And then he says, "Indeed, I have believed in your Lord, so listen to me." That last line is the one to hold. He does not say, "Listen to the messengers." He has already said that. He says, "Listen to me." He puts his own name on it in front of the people who were, moments earlier, threatening to stone somebody for exactly this. And look at the internal structure of what he said, because for a man who arrived out of breath, it is unusually well organized. He starts with an argument from self-interest, which is the one most likely to land. These men want nothing from you. Then he moves to an argument from origin, asking why he would not worship the one who made him. Then to an argument from return, since all of them are going back to him regardless. Then he tests the alternative and finds it useless, since those other objects of worship can neither intercede nor rescue. And then he stops arguing entirely and simply declares where he stands. He builds a case, and when the case is finished, he steps out from behind it. There is also nothing in his speech about himself before that point. No claim to have received anything, no vision, no authority. He is not presenting as a fourth messenger. Everything he says is reasoning that any person in that crowd could have done from where they were standing, using information all of them already had. That final move is the expensive one. A person can make an argument and remain anonymous inside it. The moment he said, "I have believed," he became the target rather than the advocate. And then the Quran does something extraordinary with the pacing. Verse 26. It was said, "Enter paradise." That is the next thing that happens. There is no description of what they did to him. No scene, no violence, no account of his death at all. The text goes directly from a man saying, "Listen to me," to a voice saying, "Enter paradise." The commentators are unanimous that the people killed him. The Quran simply does not show it. It skips the worst moment of his life and lands on the other side of it. That omission is doing something. Every instinct a storyteller has says to put the death on the page, because the death is what makes the sacrifice legible. This passage refuses. It gives you the run, the speech, and then a voice saying "enter," which means the chapter has arranged it so that the last thing you see him doing is talking, and the next thing you hear is him talking again, somewhere else. The gap between those two is the entire event, and it is left blank. And now the line that this entire video is built around. The rest of verse 26 and verse 27. He said, "I wish my people knew of how my Lord has forgiven me and placed me among the honored." Read that again with the situation in front of you. He has just been killed by his own townspeople for running across a city to speak on behalf of three strangers who were passing through. He arrives in paradise. He is told to enter, and the first thing he says, the very first thing, is a wish about the people who killed him. Not a complaint, not a request for justice against them, not relief at his own escape. He wishes they could know what he now knows. Sit with what kind of wish that is. If they knew, they would not have done it. And more than that, if they knew, they could have it too. His first instinct on entering paradise is that the wrong people are outside it. This is the only place in the entire Quran where we hear the voice of a person speaking from inside paradise, in the present, describing what it is like. And what he does with the moment is spend it on the people who murdered him. That is the emotional center of Surah Yasin, and it sits almost exactly in the middle of the chapter. And the very next verses make the contrast unbearable. Verse 28. And we did not send down upon his people after him any soldiers from the heaven, nor would we have done so. Verse 29. It was not but one shout, and immediately they were extinguished. The people who killed him were finished by a sound. No army, no siege, no campaign. The Quran specifically notes that no forces were sent down, and that none were going to be, as though preempting the assumption that a response on that scale would require one. Now put the two halves of that side by side. A man with no standing ran the length of a city because he thought he might be too late. and the response that ended the entire town required nothing at all. The effort was all on the human side, every bit of it. And then verse 30, which is one of the saddest lines in the Quran. How regretful for the servants. No messenger comes to them except that they ridicule him. That is not addressed to that town. It is a general statement, delivered in the voice of grief, about people in general and across all time. Quick word before we continue. If this is landing for you, take a second to subscribe and hit that like button. It genuinely moves this channel forward more than you would think. And I want your answer in the comments on this one, because I think it separates people. This man had no title, no position, and no standing in the argument, and he ran anyway, and it cost him his life within the same passage. Was that worth it? Would you have run? Tell me honestly. I read them all. Then stay with me, because the second half of this chapter is where the structure closes, and the final two words of the surah are the exact opposite of the two letters it opened with. Back to the structure. The second half of the chapter turns away from that town and toward everybody. It runs through a sequence of signs, and the sequence is deliberately domestic. The dead earth that is revived and produces grain that people eat, gardens of palms and grapevines, the night from which the day is withdrawn, the sun running its course, the moon moving through its measured stages, ships riding on the sea, and the cattle people keep. All of it is the sort of thing a person walks past every day without registering. And notice the argument being run through that list, because it is the same argument the man with the bone will make at the end of the chapter. Every item on it is a thing that was dead or absent, and then was not. Ground with nothing growing in it produces grain. Night is withdrawn, and day is there. The moon returns to the same shape it had a month ago. The whole sequence is a catalogue of ordinary recurrence, and recurrence is resurrection at a scale nobody finds surprising. The chapter is not asking you to believe something new. It is pointing out that you already watch it happen constantly and have stopped noticing. Then it moves to the hour, and the trumpet, and people coming out of their graves, and the sorting. And in the middle of describing paradise, the chapter does something that is worth slowing right down for. It gives 3 verses of physical description. It says the companions of paradise that day will be occupied and delighted. It says they and their spouses will be in shade, reclining on adorned couches. It says they will have fruit there, and whatever they ask for. Shade, couches, fruit, things you can picture, and things that make sense to a person from a hot country. And then verse 58 arrives, and the register changes completely. Salamun, Qawlan min Rabbin Rahim. Peace, a word from a merciful Lord. That is the whole verse. It is one of the shortest in the chapter. Now, look at what just happened structurally, because this is the piece almost nobody points out. The chapter describes paradise in physical terms for 3 verses, and then stops describing it. The furniture stops, the fruit stops, and what arrives instead is a spoken word, delivered directly, with the source identified. And notice the second word in the verse, Qawlan. It means a saying, a spoken utterance. The verse is not describing a condition of peacefulness or an atmosphere. It is telling you that a word is said, out loud, and who says it. The commentators note that this is God addressing the people of paradise directly, and that among everything described in that place, this is presented as the thing itself. Al-Qurtubi and others treat it as the highest of what is given there, above the shade and the fruit and the couches, because it is unmediated. One word, spoken, from a Lord described specifically as merciful. And it is worth noticing which of the divine names the verse selects. Not the powerful, not the sovereign, not the judge, all of which appear elsewhere in this same chapter. At the moment of the greeting, the name given is the merciful. The chapter has just finished describing judgment and separation. The criminals have been told to stand apart, 2 verses later. And in the middle of that, the word that reaches the other group is peace, and the attribute attached to the speaker is mercy. Now put verse 58 next to verse 26 and look at the shape. At verse 26, a human being speaks from inside paradise, and what he says is a wish that his people knew. That is a voice going out. He is in, and he is thinking about the people who are not, and he is powerless to reach them. At verse 58, God speaks to the people of paradise, and what he says is one word, that is a voice coming in. The chapter puts the human longing first and the divine answer second, with about 30 verses between them, and it never draws a line connecting the two. You have to notice it yourself. And the two utterances are almost mirror images in their construction. His is long, conditional, and full of longing. It wishes for something that has not happened and that he cannot bring about. The divine word is a single syllable, unconditional, and it is not a wish about anything. It simply arrives. One is a man straining toward people he cannot reach. The other is God reaching people who cannot come to him on their own. And then the chapter ends, and the ending is the reason this video exists. The last section returns to an argument. A man, the Quran says, comes to the Prophet, peace be upon him, with an objection, and he brings a physical demonstration. He takes a decayed bone, crumbles it in his hand, and asks, who could possibly give life to bones once they are like this? The verse says he forgot his own creation while making the point. The answer given is short. Say, he will give them life who produced them the first time, and he is knowing of every creation. Look at how that answer works, because it does not add any information. It does not explain a mechanism or offer evidence the man did not already have. It simply points at something he was standing inside of and had stopped counting. He exists. That happened once. The verse notes that he forgot his own creation, and forgetting is the exact accusation, because the fact was never hidden from him. He walked past it the way the chapter has just spent 30 verses describing people walking past dead ground that produces grain. The whole second half of Surah Yasin is one argument delivered twice, once through agriculture and astronomy, and once through a man holding a bone. Then the chapter widens the frame. It points to the green tree from which fire is produced, which is a thing that man himself uses. A living tree, wet and growing, and inside it the fire a person will later strike out of the dry wood. Something that appears to be the opposite of fire is quietly carrying it the whole time, which is the same argument as the seed in dead ground, made one more way. And then verse 81 asks the question that closes the argument. Is not the one who created the heavens and the earth able to create the like of them? And it answers itself immediately with a single word meaning yes. And then verse 82, his command, when he intends a thing, is only that he says to it, be, and it is. In Arabic, the operative part is two words, kun fayakun, be, and it is. That is the mechanism. That is the entire answer to the man with the crumbled bone, and to every version of that objection that has been raised since. Not a description of a process, not an account of how the reassembly works. Two words. Now go back to the beginning of the chapter. Surah Yasin opens with two letters that mean nothing. Ya, Sin, two of the smallest units of language there are, placed at the front of the chapter, carrying no meaning that any human being has ever been able to establish. And Surah Yasin closes with two words that mean everything. Kun fayakun, two units of language that, according to the verse, are the entire distance between something not existing and something existing. That is the structure. And it is not a coincidence available only in English. In Arabic, both ends are literally two units of language, announced as such. The opening is two-letter names, pronounced separately, refusing to combine into a word. The closing is two words that combine into the shortest possible complete statement of cause and effect. The chapter is bracketed. It opens with the smallest possible amount of language carrying no accessible meaning, and it closes with the smallest possible amount of language carrying total creative power. Both ends are 2 units long. One end you cannot understand at all. The other end is the origin of everything you have ever seen. Language at its most inert, and language at its most active, holding the 2 ends of the same chapter. And it never tells you that it has done this. There is no verse in Surah Yasin that says, "Notice the symmetry of the opening and the closing." The chapter simply is that shape, and it leaves the shape sitting there for whoever puts the 2 ends side by side, which is, when you think about it, exactly the lesson of both ends at once, something small, that you cannot see the significance of, which turns out to be doing enormous work. The chapter teaches its own reading method by being shaped like the thing it teaches. And that is a claim you can check yourself in about a minute. Open the chapter, read the first line, then read the last 2. Nothing in between is required to see it. Now let us assemble the whole thing, because the middle fits the frame. At one end, 2 letters. Language you cannot read. then an oath by a book described as precise, then a town that refuses 2 messengers, and then a third, and a man from the farthest edge of it, who runs toward an argument he has no standing in, says, "Listen to me," and is killed for it. Then paradise, and the only human voice we ever hear from inside it, wishing his people knew. Then the ordinary world, laid out as evidence: grain, palms, grapevines, night, sun, moon, ships, cattle, all of it walked past daily. Then the hour, and the sorting. Then one word, spoken directly from a merciful Lord. Then a man with a handful of crumbled bone, and an answer of 2 words. That is a chapter about small things carrying weight that nobody notices. The letters at the start, the man at the edge of the city, the seed in the dead ground, the single word in paradise, and the 2 syllables that make a universe. And the theme holds even for the people who lose in this chapter. The town is not destroyed by an army. It is ended by a shout, and the Quran goes out of its way to say that no forces were sent and none were going to be. Small things, at every point, doing what you would expect to require something enormous. Nothing in Surah Yasin is presented as large. The largest thing in the chapter is a sound that ends a town, and the verse mentioning it is 1 line long. Even the chapter's own dimensions fit the pattern. 83 verses, around 730 words. It is not one of the long chapters. A person can read the whole thing in about 20 minutes, and most of what happens in it happens in a handful of lines. Which brings this back to where we started. The reason people give for reciting this chapter is a reward multiplier attached to a narration its own collector rejected. The reason that actually holds is sitting in the text, unguarded, available to anyone who reads the whole thing in one sitting and notices what the first 2 units and the last 2 units are doing. You do not need a disputed hadith to justify reading Surah Yasin. You need 83 verses and 20 minutes. And there is something a little uncomfortable in that, which is worth naming before we finish. A chapter about people failing to notice the significance of ordinary things has been read, for centuries, by people who mostly do not notice what is in it. The grain in the dead earth, the moon in its stages, the man running at the edge of the city. Every one of them is the same lesson, and the chapter has been recited over and over by communities who were told it was worth 10 Qurans and never told what was actually inside it. That is not a criticism of anyone reciting it. It is an argument for reading it once, slowly, in translation, from beginning to end. One more thing about the shape of it, and then we are done. A chapter that opens with something unreadable and closes with 2 words that create is, in its own construction, an argument about revelation itself. It hands you something you cannot decode and asks you to keep reading anyway. And then, 80 verses later, it tells you that the distance between nothing and everything is a spoken word. If you accepted the first 2 syllables without understanding them, you have already practiced the posture the last 2 require. That is the chapter teaching you how to receive it, using nothing but its own first and last lines. And the last thing worth saying belongs to that man at the farthest end of the city. His wish, the only thing he asked for after death, was that his people would know how his Lord had forgiven him. He wanted the news of a pardon delivered to the people who had killed him, and he could not deliver it. That message did get out. It is in verse 27, where anybody can read it, and it has been readable for 1400 years, in more languages than he could have known existed, by people whose towns did not exist when he died. And it is stated even more plainly elsewhere. In chapter 39, verse 53, say, "O my servants who have transgressed against themselves, do not despair of the mercy of God. Indeed, God forgives all sins. Indeed, He is the forgiving, the merciful." And notice who He is in the text. He has no name. The Quran does not give it, and the commentators who supply one are supplying it from outside the Quran. He has no title, no tribe mentioned, no lineage, and no position. The only thing the chapter records about His identity is His address, and even that is given as a direction rather than a place. The farthest end. He is, by every measure the text provides, nobody at all, and His sentence has outlasted the town, the messengers whose names we are not given, and everyone who was standing in that center deciding whether to stone somebody. He wished His people knew. The wish was granted. It just took a book to do it. If you want to go further into the 2 letters at the front of this chapter, and the 29 chapters that open the same way, The video on the 14 letters nobody has ever explained is on this channel, and it is the natural next one to watch.